Now we've moved on to the next part of our lesson, and that is the two main groups of plants. Those are the non-vascular plants and the vascular plants. As you can see over here, we have the non-vascular plants, and these plants do not have a well-developed system for transporting water and food. They don't have a true root system, they don't have stems, and they do not have leaves. Legitimately, they get their nutrients directly from the environment itself. So therefore, they have to pass it from cell to cell, the water and the nutrients. And a lot of times, this is through the entire term that we learned earlier this year of osmosis. When we're moving from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration through a selectively permeable membrane. So, the three parts, or the three main groups of the non-vascular plants are your mosses, which are over here. We have our liverworts, which are located here, and then the hornworts that are here. So when you look at these, we have a lot of distinctive characteristics that are the same, and a lot of them that are different. The next group, like we've have on the slide, is the vascular plants. The vascular plants, there's many different kinds, and they can grow large. Their body is divided into two different systems. They have a root system made up of roots and other underground tissue structures, and then they also have the shoot system. The structures are stems, leaves, flowers, and those are the three major kinds of organs that the vascular plants technically have. Now looking specifically at one of the seedless non-vascular plants, all right, the first one that we're going to look at is mosses. All right, so we've all seen moss. Maybe you've been down by a stream or you've been close to different rocks and you see this little green blanket of, looks like grass, but it's not grass. This is your moss. So mosses grow on moist soil and on rocks. They can form a fuzzy mat of tiny green plants, and they have leafy stalks or rhizoids. A rhizoid is a non-vascular root-like structure that helps mosses attach to the surfaces that they are on, such as the rocks or the trees. They help the plants get water and the nutrients. The rhizoids would be located way down underneath. If you are looking at the drawing that I'm looking at right here, the rhizoids would be located there, and they help the plant to get the water and the nutrients that they need. Mosses, they can grow pretty much in any harsh environment as well as any clean environment because they can attach themselves anywhere. The next one that we're going to talk about is going to be the liverwort and the hornwort. These two are very similar. They are both non-vascular, they're both small, they live in damp environments. The liverwort, however, this one right here, they can be leafy, and they could also be moss-like, and they have broad, flattened shapes of their plant-like. Now, the hornwort, on the other hand, this one has more of the broad, flattened leaf-like structure, and that's kind of like the grass that you see here, right? And their rhizoids hold them in place, and you can see the rhizoids down in this area. Then we can move on to the seedless vascular plants, and they're classified by some specific common characteristics. Those characteristics include that they all have a vascular tissue. All right, there's one. That's what allows the water to get from one place to another, or the nutrients to get to one place to another. They all have roots or stems. I shouldn't say or, it's and. Stems and leaves. So they all have that in common. Not only that, but they can all have the opportunity to reproduce with spores. So we have several examples of these types of plants. We have the ferns, which many of you are probably more aware of than any of the other plants. And those are these ones that you can see in people's houses or hanging outside. They grow in the forest floor. Some people have them around their houses. All right. And they often grow as houseplants, like I said. They too have rhizoids. They have rhizomes. And that is something that helps them to spread, and the rhizomes are located underground. It's an underground stem where the new leaves and the new roots can grow. So up under this plant, there's the rhizoids that can then extend them to go further and further and out. And then another plant here can go further and further and further out. Now the whisk ferns that we have, which is also in the fern group, they are related to the other ferns, but they look very different. They do have rhizoid leaves, they don't have roots, and they grow that have an appearance of a button instead of other forms. Then, going back to the fern itself, we have that they do have leaves, and these things are called fronds. A lot of people call them frond plants, if they do not want to call them ferns, and they uncurl as they grow. The next one is the horsetail. They have cane-like stems, as you can see, and they have leaves that grow in unique whorl patterns around the stems. So you can go around the stem. And they can grow up to be probably about 24 feet tall. And they can grow in wet, marshy places. Their stems are hollow, and they actually contain cilia, which is a gritty, rough texture. And the pioneers, they used to collect the horsetails and would break them down and then put them together as best as they could, and then use them to scrub their pots and pans. And then we have the club mosses. The club mosses look like true mosses, but they have vascular tissue. They have the roots, the stems, and the tiny leaves. They are very small. They grow in the woodlands near the streams and the marshes, so they can sometimes be confused with the regular moss that you would see growing on rocks. Now we're moving on to the seed plants. Vascular plants that reproduce by making seeds is a vascular plant. A seed is a plant embryo in a protective coating. And seed plants also use pollen, and the pollen is a tiny structure in which sperm forms. So the sperm cell fertilizes the egg, and that egg develops into the embryo, into the seed. Seed plants are classified on whether or not their seed is enclosed in a fruit or not. The first one that we're going to discuss is gymnosperms. As it says, vascular plant that produce seeds and no flowers and fruits. Seeds and cones or hard berries is what you're going to see, and there are 4 groups. The conifers, the cycads, the ginkgos, and the gnetophytes, and most of them are the evergreens. The cycads, which are these up here, are found mostly in the tropics, and they have short stems and palm-like leaves. The cycads produce seeds on large protective cones, and only about 140 species of cycads still exist. And right here is where you're going to find that cone. The next group we're going to look at is the conifers. So the conifers are probably the ones that you recognize the most. They are the most common type that you're going to see. They are the most common gymnosperm. They produce seeds and cones and have needle-like leaves. This group includes the pine trees that you see, the cedars, the redwoods, and the junipers. And they're going to be green most of the year. The ginkgo is the next one. The ginkgos are actually my favorite. They have round, grape-like seeds, and they're not covered by a cone, located right there. They are the gymnosperms that are pollution tolerant and are used in traditional medicines, and only the ginkgo biloba is still alive today. Its leaves are fan-shaped and its seeds are round and not covered by the cone like this one. You can see the fan shape right there. I technically have 3 of these in my yard. One thing that's really cool and not cool at the same time with the ginkgo is that the seeds covered by the cone, not covered by the cone, smell like rotting butter. It's an interesting but distinct smell. Going back to the conifers real quick, there's a couple of things that I forgot to mention. Not only does the word itself mean cone bearing, the cones are very specific for their reproduction, but the wood that they have when they're grown up trees is used for building paper products that we use on a daily basis. They also produce a sticky fluid that's called resin, and that helps to make the soap that you use, the paint that you use in classes, and the ink in pens. The second one of the seed plants and how they're classified is the angiosperms. They too are the vascular plant, and it produces the flower, of which you see here, and fruits, which surround and protect the seed. They are the most abundant plant type of today. The reproductive structure itself is the flower, and as you can see in the picture, the flower is made up of several parts. You're going to need to understand that the part that covers the outside before the flower truly opens is the sepal. We also have the petals, which are the colorful parts here, here, and here. Then we also have the stamen, and the stamen is the male parts, the male reproductive structure. And they have two parts that are important right here. We have the filament that brings it all the way up to the anther. And the anther is attached to the filament, and it's the part that produces the pollen. And the pollen is the part of the male reproductive structure that's going to have the sperm. The next thing that we need to know is the stamen. And the stamen is, not the stamen, the pistil. The pistil is going to be the area that's located from here down to here. So on this picture, they have this located as the female parts. This is the style. All right. We have the ovary located here. The ovules are the eggs that are down here. And when the eggs go up through the style and end up at the top, it is then called the stigma. And that's where we need to focus on the next lesson, is going to be the how do flowering plants reproduce. But these are all of the parts that you need to know make up the angiosperms. One of my favorite parts about the angiosperms is the fact that they give off a wonderful scent to some. Others may not think so, but they're there for people to buy, for people to use as color for their houses, and just in natural everyday life, they are the ones that make up the beauty part of the plant.